How about Monaco, huh? You know, usually we don't see a whole lot in Monaco. Normally there's no overtakes. There's usually a very set in stone grid. But this time around we had penalties that were going on were crazy. The DNFs that happened were unexpected. In comparison to last year's Monaco, there really was nothing that happened. But we had a whole red flag on lap 68, and then the restart happens and you've got a whole nother race going on. So let's just talk a little bit about who won the race, and then we'll get into my predictions. Kimi Antonelli, number one. He is a 5-time race winner, 5 in a row, as a matter of fact, along the likes of Jim Clark, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher. I mean, big names. And then if you watch the race, you know that the commentators said no driver that has ever won 5 in a row has ever lost in a season. And then in number 2, we had Lewis Hamilton. And number 3, we had Isack Hadjar. A lot of this came down to penalties. I think Hamilton even had a penalty. Leclerc was in second, and then he crashed. You had Stroll crashing. The tarmac was broken. Just a crazy race. Now we can just get into our predictions. If you haven't watched the race, go watch the race highlights. What are you doing here watching my reaction video? I know I'm entertaining, but you need to go watch the highlight video first. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment for me if you wanted someone else to win, or if you think Kimi Antonelli is going to win the championship this year. I'll respond to you and tell you if you're right or wrong. So for my bold prediction, I said that Isack Hadjar would qualify P5 and finish P5 or better. You have Isack, who pretty much for 60 laps was complaining about having some problems in the car, not having the ability to use gear 1. So for him to be able to get the result in P3 and still have managed to hold on despite having those problems all the way early in the race was a big deal. Very impressive stuff. Probably the best prediction I've had by far, because I don't think anyone else predicted that Isack Hadjar would do P5 or better. And as a matter of fact, he finished on the podium. Now, if I would have said Isack Hadjar podium, I think I would have called myself crazy. That is a monster prediction for a race like Monaco, which requires very good qualifying. And he finished better than what I expected, and he qualified exactly where I thought he would. And as I've kind of already discussed with my championship leader prediction, Kimi Antonelli did not finish P3. He didn't qualify P3, qualified P1, and he finished P1. Kimi Antonelli did very well once again, winning 5 races in a row. So that means that my prediction for Kimi was not quite correct. He had a great race weekend. I believe it's called a career grand slam, where you lead every lap of the race and you have the fastest lap and you start in P1 and finish in P1. So Kimi Antonelli was able to do that, and props to him, because I was hoping that he would. Monaco's a pretty good circuit for it, and considering the fact that he would have had the greatest gap of all time at Monaco if the safety car would not have come out, that tells you a lot about what kind of pace Kimi Antonelli had. Now, I also want to say that if Max Verstappen had not DNF'd, I do think that Max would have just been P2. I'm almost confident that Max would not have been able to compete, especially with the state of the Red Bull from Max's side and from Hadjar's side. I just don't see a world where Max would have been able to catch up. And as a matter of fact, he probably would have slowed Hamilton and Leclerc down quite a bit, I think. Now, moving on to my biggest loser prediction. Once again, I was off on this one. The biggest loser, I said it would be Oscar Piastri and Lando doing really well. But if Lando does well, then Oscar is not going to do well, and he is therefore the biggest loser because Lando is going to do so well this weekend. That was my prediction. Lando didn't even out-qualify Piastri, so what ended up happening was Piastri was P6 and Lando was P8, and Piastri ended up finishing the race in P4, almost getting a podium from Isack, and then Lando had a power unit issue and he had to drop out of the race and retire, which is unfortunate as well because Lando was doing pretty well. At the end of the day, Lando is definitely not the winner in this situation for McLaren, and Piastri was definitely not the biggest loser. The biggest loser this week is either Max Verstappen or George Russell. You can make an argument for both, but I do think that it is pretty obvious at the same time. It has to be George Russell. I continue to say this. Every time that George Russell does not win a race, every time that he finishes second to Antonelli, he is losing race points and losing confidence in himself as well as in his team for keeping him for so long and promising him a championship. I do think that George Russell, every single time that he is not able to overtake Antonelli, he's just losing out. And obviously that's how it works with teammates, but when you're really thinking about the grand scheme of who's going to win the championship, this is what we're talking about. So, George Russell, why are we pulling into the pit lane? I think this was a serious issue on Mercedes' side in general, because I think Mercedes should have told George earlier, because we all know that Monaco has a very, very tight pit window and the laps are quicker. So George would have been at a very big disadvantage to go back around. He would have gotten passed again if he wouldn't have pitted when he did. But the engineer told him after he was already turning into the pits that he was supposed to stay out. And that was the big problem. So then George goes, doesn't serve his actual penalty, and then proceeds to have another drive-through penalty afterwards, which is like 20 seconds, and ends up not scoring any points at all. This is a huge deal for George because, once again, it's not just about unlucky at this point. We're talking about like a brutal first 6 races of the season. I mean, this is a really, really tough run for somebody that was supposedly the favorite. And now Antonelli is the clear favorite. George Russell has to be the biggest loser. And George Russell will need to win several races this season in order to keep up and compete with Antonelli, and need a little bit of luck on his side, because at this rate, if Antonelli even makes it in every single race and gets points in every single race, George Russell is not going to be able to maintain it. He won't be able to make up this gap. I think the gap's close to 66 points now. So we're looking at a very big gap for George Russell to overcome. Now for my unique prediction, I had Lewis Hamilton once again outpacing Charles Leclerc. This did happen. Lewis did in fact have more pace than Charles Leclerc in qualifying, and this is where it gets debatable. He did finish ahead of Charles Leclerc and would have finished ahead of Charles Leclerc in the event that the race did not have penalties and Charles Leclerc wouldn't have hit the wall. Unfortunately, this one really wasn't in his control, really at all. I would say that it was the tarmac. He didn't think it was the tarmac, and neither did Lance Stroll. But at the same time, I would say the drivers are going to be more prone to blaming themselves than blaming something that's not in their control, because that's harder to accept. I would say that that's why it's a little debatable, is because Charles would have finished ahead of Hamilton, because he was right behind Hamilton by the time that he did end up crashing after the safety car. But in qualifying, Hamilton had more pace. And therefore, we have to say in the race, because Monaco is Monaco, and the qualifying, that Hamilton did in fact outpace Charles Leclerc. That is 3 correct predictions and 3 impressive predictions. You guys aren't ready for this one. Midfield prediction. I had Lindblad finishing P9 or better in the race. He finished P6. That is crazy. Racing Bulls has a double points finish. I think this is Liam Lawson's best ever finish in a race, P5. Obviously, it's Lindblad's best result ever at P6. And honestly, a great pick for me. I'm very happy that it panned out this way, considering where he was in qualifying. I think for most of these midfield and backfield teams, the goal was just to survive, right? I mean, that's kind of how it felt, is you just have to try to live. I'll take it. I will absolutely take this one, 100%. And for my backfield prediction, we had Aston Martin, and I said that neither of them would finish the race. I thought they would both DNF or DNS or something of that nature. But as a matter of fact, we had quite the opposite. We had Fernando Alonso, due to a post-race penalty on Cadillac's Sergio Perez, actually getting P10 and scoring Aston Martin's points. Oh my goodness, he finishes with 1 point. Oh, we could just call it a season for Aston Martin. I mean, this is the type of stuff. Hey, in my prediction video at the start of the season, I said that Alonso would be the one to score points if it was anyone out of those 4 drivers, and it would be in a race like this where all it was about was surviving and they could get lucky in P10. That is exactly what happened. And you know what? As far as the race prediction, I was wrong. I was half wrong. because Stroll didn't make it, which is kind of a DNF prediction in itself. But Alonso made it. And for my season prediction as a whole, this one, very good. And for my DNF prediction, well, Franco Colapinto did get a penalty, and I did think that he was going to DNF when he hit the Williams of Carlos Sainz, but he didn't, and he stayed in the race. And I can't say that I'm, resentful of him not actually retiring from the race as well. I was kind of like, oh, maybe he'll actually retire, but, I can't say, wow, this one really sucked. Colapinto didn't get it. If I'm just picking out of a hat and I'm not really thinking too much about it, then Colapinto, okay, he didn't DNF this week, maybe next week. But this was a pretty cool race. I recommend watching it again if you have the opportunity. If you've never watched it, I would definitely go back and watch the replay. You can do that. I believe you can do that on Sky Sports, and you can do it on Apple TV for sure for us Americans. Make sure to go do that. If you really like these videos and you want to see some more, then make sure that you're going to subscribe so you can keep coming back. I'm going to make a good video coming up. I've got one in the works right now. I just recorded it yesterday. So we're back on a good schedule. We're back on producing some good videos. I'm going to be editing it this week. And also we have another race next week. So I'll be making race predictions for that too. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking out the reaction video. And you know what? You got to come back for more because I am probably going to be right again next week. Thank you all for tuning in. See you in the next one. Peace.